Hello, I'm Chris Moon, a fellow artist manager, and I will be your guide through tough love, adventures, and artist management. For our first episode of 2021, I'm excited to share a lively conversation with Lazerbeak, member of the hip-hop collective Doomtree. He's also the GM and manager of Doomtree and the band Heartbones. Beak wears a lot of hats and juggles them all in fine form. We chat about that juggling act, switching between the artistic endeavors while balancing the business side of things. We also discuss his early years in an indie rock band, his entry point into making beats and transitioning over into hip-hop with Doomtree, and how those relationships open doors to work with other artists such as Lizzo. We go deep and into a bit of overtime, but it's a fun journey, and I hope you stick through it with us until the end. Without further ado, here's Lazerbeak.
I am Lazerbeak, government name Aaron Mader, but in the year 2000, anyone working in hip-hop needed a name that wasn't their government name. So Lazerbeak happened, and 20 years later, I'm stuck with it. I am a producer and artist, I guess, first. And I've been making music for probably the last 25 years. Started in playing guitar in indie rock bands, and then moved into production, primarily in like hip hop, R&B, pop music. But I also, over the years, have gotten a lot more into the business side of things. So, my delusions of grandeur as a 8th grader thinking I would headline Lollapalooza turned into, running a record label and managing bands and basically working an office job on paper as far as like email, incoming emails and conference calls and whatnot. So it's been cool though. I still have a foot in the music thing by any means possible.
No, that's awesome. I'll have to be honest. When I got an email from you for the first time, and I was looking at your signature, I almost had a heart attack just reading through all the things you're involved with. Just like the stress level of what it must be like to kind of switch gears between being, a creative, whether it's songwriting, producing, to the management side of things. I mean, it's a rare beast that can tackle all of that as well as you do, and switch gears like that. I'm sure that's got to be exhilarating, but also probably daunting task at times.
That's a perfect way of putting it. Yeah, the full spectrum, right? I mean, and I'm motivated by fear and by stress to a certain degree, so it helps me stay on top of things. I like being busy, and I like having a lot of things in the air. Although I've certainly gone off the deep end many times, and I'm sure we'll continue to in the future. So I'm getting better at seeing the rabbit hole, the anxiety rabbit hole before I'm inside of it. But yeah, there's I'm kind of eternally biting off more than I can chew, oftentimes. But it keeps it interesting. I'm definitely not bored.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doing either one of those jobs, the creative side of things and the business side of things, I'd like to think in this industry, at least, is always kind of keeps you on your toes and changes from day to day. But how do you balance that? I'm just curious. Like, do you go in a hole and be creative for a while and kind of shed some of the business stuff, or do you have like office hours or certain times during the day that you do one or the other? Just from a practical perspective,
I work in progress probably for the rest of my days. But no, I've finally gotten. So I'm 38. Took me a long time to figure out the balance, and honestly, in the early years, it was just musician, and I would work whatever. I was delivering pizzas for 10 years, like any job, just to like be able to go on tour and be a musician. And so the business side, I wasn't putting in that many hours on it. And as I got older, one, just as the music was growing and the artists I was working with were growing, someone had to step in to do the not sexy stuff. And I kind of was the one that raised my hand generally. And then, you get older, and for me, I got married, had kids, all of a sudden you got a mortgage. And so the little bit of money you could pick up at gigs all of a sudden doesn't start to be the most stable of month to month. Doesn't keep the roof over your head at all times. So that was as I then started to bring in these new roles like managing artists and really, GMing a record label. Then the balance shifted greatly. And so then all of a sudden it's like, I got to a point where I wasn't allowed to have any time to make music, and 110% of myself was given to just making sure everything was staying on course. And that made me really sad and crabby. that my wife can definitely attest to. I've learned that I have this creative energy and I need an outlet for it. It doesn't have to be like, the whole world doesn't have to hear it. But if I'm not creating something out of nothing, I get really bummed. It's like part of my thing that keeps me ticking. So in the last couple of years, I had to really be strategic. It used to be that I would make a beat every single day. And then it got to the point where I would make one thing every month. So now I'm very regimented. I'm like I need a calendar and a schedule and a timeline and a checklist. But now I actually go in and block my calendar off for like 2 hours at a time. And that might only happen twice a week, but out of necessity, my workflow has gotten faster. I'm able to like make music quicker, because if I didn't, I wouldn't make any music. So I'm just kind of learning as I'm going how to, you just pick up the shortcuts or you find your groove. It used to take me, probably 8 hours in a day, a full shift, right, to kind of create a basic musical zone. And then it would take me another day of 8 hours to flesh that out and sequence it and arrange it and turn it into an actual song. And, I don't know if this is for better or worse sometimes, but I can now do that 16 hours into, like, yesterday. I think I had 2.5 hours in between conference calls and I did it. It's that
wow.
It's not to say that it maybe is as good as the 16 hours, but in a way it's helped me release some of the preciousness that I hold on to things, or like the perfectionist in me. And so it allows me to just kind of like embrace the unknown and just roll with it. So anyways, long answer to your question, but I try really hard to schedule creative time, because otherwise it will be the first thing that gets, dropped to the bottom of my enormous list of to-dos as far as the business side. And then on top of that,
right.
You can attest to this, Chris, like having a family and a wife and trying to maintain the work-life balance when there's other people in your inner circle like that depend on you, not just for resources, but like, emotional affection and whatnot, like right. Just mental capacity to be there in the moment and present with them. I struggled for, the last 10 years finding that space, just for my wife at first. And then as we had 3 kids, and now I'm really pretty strictly office hours. Like, people know now. I used to be the guy that would answer your email. I'd leave the ping on, and if it went off at 2 a.m, I'd be up and hitting you back. And slowly over the last 3 or 4 years, I've kind of embedded it into people's brains that, like, if it's after 5, you can text me if it's urgent, but it's probably not urgent, and you'll hear back from me at like 6:30 the next morning. So that feels good. I'm finally able to, and I can turn off a little bit. So, like 7 o'clock and it's movie time, I'm not just like frantically doom scrolling my emails or anything. I can know that, okay, first thing in the morning, I'll be back at it. And most things I've found can wait till the morning.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. It's fascinating you've been able to condense and I guess just be so efficient creatively, because it does feel like that kind of energy would be hard to kind of bottle up and expend in a tight period of time. Where on the flip side of that, my wife's pointed out to me several times that, I can fill my time when it comes to the business side of things, work, like as much as I give myself that much space to do, right? It's like, it's never like, oh, I'm done.
Right. There's always something.
To do.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like a never ending Tetris game or something. It just, you build your way up and it just keeps coming.
Right.
That's totally right. And in a way, I'm relieved, as much as I will rant and bitch about my family and how annoying they can be, as you do when you have kids. I'm really, really grateful on many levels, but also just for the fact that it kind of forced me to release some of that. Like, I'm just like you. Like, if I didn't have anything else that I had to do, I would just work all the time. And that's not healthy. Even if you don't have family, it's not healthy.
No, it's not.
So it's been nice to have kind of this just built-in check for myself that keeps me kind of a human being instead of a robot.
Right. Yeah, it's finding a healthy balance, especially with the work that we do in the industry we work in, and then also just the times right
Yeah,
now in
I know.
general
I know.
makes it incredibly challenging. But it's good to talk about those things
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
definitely helps to realize you're not alone in it. That's one thing I can say about
Right.
this last year in all walks of life.
Well, before we go off on too many tangents, I wanted to. I'd be remiss not to at least kind of dial it back a bit and get a little bit more of your
Sure.
history into the conversation. So you mentioned you started playing initially as a musician in indie rock bands. Like, what was that whole experience like, and how did that kind of pivot over into hip hop?
So um, I grew up pretty Christian family, so we didn't really listen to secular music, and I was used to my mom and dad singing kind of hymns after dinner and that kind of thing. So, but I was able to listen to just kind of the radio stations. So KDWB, for those of you in the Twin Cities, was like kind of at that point in the late '80s was like our R&B station, pop R&B, but like Boys to Men, SWV, and they played a little bit of rap. So I grew up like an R&B head. Like I loved that early '90s R&B. I still do. And then I was very fortunate to have gone to a public school that kind of made you. They offered a band program and an orchestra program and a choir program.
Oh wow!
And so in fourth grade, I got to pick an instrument, and I picked alto saxophone probably because Lisa Simpson and the Simpsons at that time, if I'm being honest. It seemed like that was like the cool, the cool instrument. I learned very quickly that in the early '90s, really all of the '90s, saxophone was maybe the least cool instrument, although it has had a great comeback recently. It really is.
Yeah.
But so I'm playing it in like the Kenny G years, and being like, why didn't I pick percussion or trumpet? But that got me to, in seventh grade, junior high, I ended up, the districts changed and I went to a different school. I didn't know anybody. And I somehow met a couple of friends, and they were the indie rock kids, right? They had like the Sonic Youth t-shirts, and they had already started a band with their little like $100 Fender Squier guitars and whatnot. And so I just kind of, as you are so impressionable at that time, I just started listening to what they were listening to, and I was really intrigued. It was actually, what was the song that was the pivotal crossover for me? Oh, Cornflake Girl by Tori Amos was like,
oh yeah,
that was the song where, I tried listening to, I think it was 93.7 The Edge or something like that. It was like the alt rock station. And that song came on and I was like, well, this kind of has like a singy R&B feel to it. Like maybe I could get into this stuff. And then Pavement had put out Crooked Rain, and that was like the hook into that world. And sure enough, by summer going into eighth grade, I had dug up my dad's acoustic guitar from when he was a youth pastor years back, and like every kid, had figured out my like 2-chord pop punk song, and by eighth grade we were in a band with those same friends, and that band was called the Plastic Constellations, and I was really my only band, but it was like my full-time music thing that I did from eighth grade to, I don't know, 2000 and maybe 12 years ago. So we grew up together. Jeff Allen, the other singer and guitarist in that band, still my best friend to this day. We've raised our kids together, and we got to really experience music and all that stuff at such an early age. We were really fortunate too that our high school had a independent study program. So if you could convince a teacher that this idea that you had was worth them signing on to, and you could prove you were going to put so many hours into it, they would give you credit for it. Wow. So we started our record label in eighth grade. We put out a 7-inch in ninth grade. We got to do all that for school credit, which was amazing.
That's awesome.
And so that was kind of I kind of cut my teeth in that scene. And by high school, we were starting to open up for bands in the city. Our first big show, we opened up for Low at First Avenue for their holiday show, and I'll never forget it. I think I broke like 3 strings, and but so we got a little taste at an early age. We got to be hanging out with the cool older people, and then we hit the road in my mom's minivan and toured for a good part of the early 2000s. So anyways, we eventually, like the height of our quote unquote success is we signed to French Kiss Records for our last 2 albums.
Okay.
Got to tour with the Hold Steady, and got to check off a lot of like pretty profound things off of my bucket list at an early age. And so in that, I fought in high school. God, I'm all over the place, Chris. Sorry. This is good.
No, this is great. I didn't know any of this. And, and I feel like you and I have known each other for a while, and I had no idea this history.
Totally.
It's fascinating to me.
And I'm at a perfect moment in my life, in my late 30s, to be like super nostalgic and emotional about my youth. So you caught me at a good time. But I got back into hip hop in high school, and it was because of the Roots, because I was coming from a live band. I was a total, if I'm being honest, I was a total indie rock snob from like 8th grade to 12th grade. Like, oh, you're wearing that t-shirt? Well, what's their first album? And blah, blah, blah. Like, just a total dickhead. And then I had this like epiphany in senior year where I realized like everybody, I think that happens for a lot of people senior year of high school. You kind of just drop all the preconceived thoughts you have of people, and you're like, oh, it's probably because everyone parties together for the first time. It's like, oh, well, I got drunk with the fucking quarterback and he's actually okay.
Right.
And it's so, I was opening up to all these different things, shedding my indie rock cynicism. And then the Roots album, Things Fell Apart, came out. And so they're playing live instruments. I remember watching Questlove in the video for You Got Me doing like a drum and bass thing at the end, and just having my mind blown, because at that point I still kind of thought that live hip hop was super cheesy and almost just like bar band rock, and so that record was like the same way that Pavement and Matador Records and Merge Records in junior high shaped. It's like you just go down that rabbit hole. Like you get the Merge Records mail order catalog and you're like, well, I gotta get the Drive Like Jehu 7-inch and the whatever. The same thing happened with the Roots, and it was like, oh, at that point, who's this Mos Def guy featured on this song, and who's this? And I just went down the rabbit hole super hard. So now I'm in like a, successful indie rock band, having this like love affair with hip hop. And so the worlds kind of intersect. There are some, a few embarrassing moments on a couple Plastic Constellations albums where I kind of pseudo rap, which is unfortunate. In hindsight, but what are you gonna do? It's worth a shot. Sure. It was like Linkin Park was big. It's like whatever. So I learned my lesson pretty quickly, but then I was like, okay, I'm not gonna rap. I cannot dance. So I wanted to figure out a way how I could contribute to hip hop in a way that wasn't just as a listener. Suck it pretty bad at dancing outside of your typical 2-step. So breakdancing was out. I was terrified of getting busted for graffiti, so graffiti was out. DJing just didn't make any sense. I played guitar, like the way that the hands moved didn't make any sense, and rapping clearly wasn't happening. So production kind of was the thing. I was like, well, I know how to make music. I've written songs. And POS from Doomtree, actually, who was in a rival rock band in our high school with me. Well, we were like we were like the cool indie rock kids. Well, I don't know about cool. We thought we were cool. POS was in a like total pop punk band called Ohm that everybody loved, and we were like the underdog, whatever. So we had like a rivalry for a while. But then through our love of rap, we started hanging out, and he's the one who he had gotten an MPC 2000, which was like a beat machine basically. And he was like, dude, you can do this. Like, you know how to make songs. You can figure this out. And so he took me and my mom to Guitar Center. And God bless my mom and my dad. They fronted me the $1,200 for it, which is a lot of money at that. I mean, you forget how the price has gone down on, especially for production. Like it's almost free as long as you have an iPad right now, which is beautiful. But at the time that was like, that was your entry point. Like you had to at least have $1,000. And so my folks fronted me the money. I worked all summer at the movie theater to pay them back. And, I think Steph took me to a record store and showed me the basics, and POS, I should say. And, not the rest is history, but like I've been doing it ever since. And so that was 20 plus years ago. So there's the hip hop and indie rock thing happened at the same time. And I start getting my first beats placed on indie rap records as the band is still touring. And then the band comes to an end, as most do. You know, people are growing up, need real jobs, and getting married, and I decided to double down and just go all in on music. So that was when I kind of just gave myself, I was like, okay, well, I'm a producer now. I'm going to like fully embrace this. And that was kind of that was like my first vows, I feel like, that I made, like this line in the sand, like, no, I'm not going to go to school. I don't have no idea what I would want to do besides this. I'm going to give it one more shot. And luckily, you know, I've been able to stretch that shot out.
Yeah, no, that's man, what a fascinating history. I had no idea.
It's a weird one. Yeah, totally. It's pretty cool. Or I look back on it fondly, and it's just nice. Like, okay, I'm 38, and you know, like I said, that 8th grade kid in my parents', you know, in my bedroom at my folks' house, I would sit there and write. You know, it's all these things. Like, we started a fake label, basically. We're called Pretentious Records, and we were putting out our cassette demos and consigning them at the local record stores in town, and you know, sending them in the mail to any of the local zines and all that shit. And you know, I have to kind of slap myself often, because I think you'll find a way, no matter what you do, to bitch about it. Like, if we were paid, Chris, if we were paid both like $1 million a year to sit on a beach in Cancun and drink strawberry margaritas, I'm sure at some point we'd be like, God, I just wish I was blah, blah, blah. You know, like, we'd figure out a way to bitch about it. And I have to remind myself that in my path through music is that, you know, 8th grade me is pretty fucking stoked that 38-year-old me is still like doing some of this shit. And even if it didn't turn out to be what I thought it might be in 8th grade, like, oh, we're going to be headlining Lollapalooza. And in actuality, Doomtree did play Lollapalooza. We just played the like 12:30 slot to like 12 security guards.
That's still great to say you did. Though.
When they were opening
Nothing
up.
Wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. And the best part of that was we got to see what I thought was the Red Hot Chili Peppers sound checking in the morning, because they were headlining. That's the same stage we were playing. And in actuality, that was like an older fake Red Hot Chili Peppers roadies playing all their instruments for them. So they have like a whole group of like band guys. They have like a B team band that comes
I was gonna say it's the B team, right?
I was like, oh my God, Flea looks like really old. And it's like, no, that's not Flea. Anyways,
that's too funny.
Yeah. So I just cool now looking back. Like I said, I'm nostalgic, but to see that the same dream is alive, just in a much different way than I expected it to look like, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's at the heart of, you know, a bit of the anchor of this conversation, in a sense of the theme of, you know, pivots. Is it sounded like, you know, with each step there, whether you're switching genres from indie rock into, you know, hip hop and rap, or, you know, instruments or whatever, it's like you were open and finding new things and finding interesting things to kind of evolve, in a sense, and you know, be able to kind of just try things and see where it takes you. You know, when you mentioned playing Lollapalooza at 12:30, you know, it's like, yeah, it's still a badge of honor to say you're able to do that. But then I flash forward in my mind and think about all the Doomtree shows you guys did, you know, every year at First Ave around town. And it's like, you know, those are hard ticket, like serious fan experiences, which, you know, playing at a festival is not that.
Totally.
You know, when you get down to it, it's like you could almost argue that what you guys have built around Doomtree is probably in some respects more impressive than, you know, a better slot at a festival.
Totally. I mean, I'll take it, and thank you. I agree. I mean, if as much as I'd love to headline Lollapalooza, like, building up a fan base and just a community, you know, and being able to really call that a community, knowing that extended to different musical artists we worked with, different, you know, creatives, whether that's the people that make our music videos or do the artwork, or just the local companies that make our merch or print up our LPs, like, that means so much to me. And that is more important than kind of the flash in the pan stuff. You know, festivals were in that window of time where like you could get big festivals as an indie artist. It was incredible, right? Because it's like the money was real, which made no sense at the time. And then and just like, yeah, it was exciting, right? And it sounded good, but then it so quickly is gone, and the thing that remains is those same people that really are like on your team, and that's how we were able to survive through all these years, was that we did have that kind of like diehard fan base, or whatever they talk about, like that, if you can get 1,000
1,000 true fans,
then you can really do it. It's like, and we are living proof of that. I mean, it's not like our numbers aren't insane, but there's certain things, like if we can put out an album and I know that a certain amount of people, no matter what, will at least listen to it, because we kind of earned that from them. Feels good.
I mean, that's currency in and of itself, to kind of keep it all moving forward. I think I've said it before on this podcast, but the older I got into my career, the more I realized the kind of artist I wanted to associate myself with were the ones I enjoyed the most, were typically ones that would sell, consistently sell out venues of a certain size, or consistently, back in the day, sell the same amount of records. Right. It's like, it's much better to have a level of consistency so you can manage those expectations, still be bullish about it, know, and it always ebbs and flows a bit, but I'd much rather have that kind of career or follow that kind of career and support it than to have a flash in the pan type situation that, you have to wait another 20 years for the, state fair circuit or whatever, it's like, it's longevity in this game and industry is probably the hardest thing to achieve,
No question. And I am really grateful that, through, when I was younger, it was like, hurry up and let's get famous. Like, what the fuck? What's wrong with people? Why don't they get this? And Doomtree has always, and same for my band, the Plastic Constellations, really anything I've been involved in musically, it's always been this like kind of tortoise and the hare dynamic where we're just slow, and it's this really slow incline, and it just keeps moving. The thing that I like about that is that because of that pace, I was able to pick up all these different skill sets, because it wasn't like, we had a song blow up overnight and all of a sudden we had to hire a business manager and a regular manager and a booking agent, blah, blah, blah. It was like we were adding these things one leg at a time, and it was slow enough that it was like college crash course for the last 20 years. I could just slowly, through trial and error and relationships and just doing stuff, figure out how booking worked, how managing worked, how running a label worked, how being an accountant basically works, and enough to fake it till you make it, right? Like enough to get by.
Right.
And I feel like I'm eternally faking it till you make it, and I'm all in on that.
Aren't we all?
No question. So I am grateful now, looking back at the slower pace, even though in my 20s it just felt like it was, you're working double shifts at the Green Mill delivering pizzas, trying to make up for the money you lost on tour. Just like, why? But everything happens for a reason, I guess.
It does. It all comes back around for sure. So as you kind of began to dip your toe into the production side of things, obviously along came opportunities, like you were saying, to probably, dig in on the management side by default, I imagine. Yeah. But what was the catalyst to wanting to work with other artists in that capacity? Has it all kind of, I imagine a lot of this has been organic, but at the same time, there is a certain place where I'm sure you have to kind of, come to some sort of terms and commitment of the fact of like, oh, I'm doing management now and I'm taking that responsibility on. And I mean, it's clear to you, I'm sure you understood probably the bulk of what that was in the process of doing it, but it's still a very bold thing to take on as an artist yourself.
Yeah, it was truly, I stumbled into it because, for the first 10 years of, this really long period with Doomtree, I just don't think I knew I was kind of managing it. I just didn't, didn't have that name. I didn't know exactly what a manager did. I think I used to think that a manager was just going to figure out, they're going to make their money because they're going to find you that many monetary opportunities. They're just going to be like a cash flow of opportunities. And then I slowly realized, like, no, that's few and far between. A manager is managing, like it's keeping everything together. It's like you're managing expectations, most importantly, I think. And then you're also just like quarterbacking, and you're almost band, and like the way that a lot of bands have a band captain, you're almost like the band captain, and then all the other things that come with it, right? And so it wasn't until so we had a daughter and then twin boys, which were not planned, obviously. I mean, we were hoping for a second child. We just weren't expecting a third.
I follow you.
And
2 for 1.
Yeah, exactly. And that was in the span of less than 3 years. So we had 3 kids, or in less than 2 years. We had 3 kids under the age of 2. And I couldn't tour anymore. And I also was like, I can't even do any of this work anymore unless we figure out how I can make some more money, because now I have 3 mouths to feed. And touring was how I was kind of making the bulk of my money. And that was when we kind of made the decision that I would kind of officially GM the label and manage the band, and I could do that stuff from home, and those guys could go out on the road. And as we got in that moment, this is like after No Kings, which was probably our biggest record. So the No Kings All Hands, our last 2 full lengths. So that was when it was like, it was go time, because otherwise I was going to have to go try to figure out a regular job to make things work, and was going to probably have to exit a little bit out of music. So I'm grateful that, the rest of the guys were open to that. And so that then I had basically a salary then. And that allowed me to stay in it while not touring. And then what really happened, I still wasn't, I don't think, calling myself officially the manager. Then Polisa, Ryan Olson, who's a longtime friend and musical collaborator from Polisa and Gangs and Marijuana Death Squads and, 30,000 others. We would always go out and hang out and shoot the shit. And he brought me, we went and got coffee one day, and he was just like, you should manage Polisa. You should just do it. Like we're pivoting from our current management situation. And he's like, I know you don't consider yourself that, but I see what you do with Doomtree, and I think it'd be a good fit. And I kind of laughed it off for a week or two. And then in that same 2 weeks, Doomtree kind of decided to go on a kind of hiatus after a year of touring from the All Hands album. And again, I was faced with like, well, how am I going to make ends meet? And so I said yes. And then that was like, then it was official, because Polisa, especially at that time, was like a official internationally touring band. So it was like, okay, get your shit together. The fake it till you make it had to get ramped up, crank it to 11. And so that was like the moment where I was like, oh, okay, this is what I do. And then it got a lot easier as I went along. But yeah, it was some growing pains, and just even the artist in me, to a certain point was still like, managers are lame, man. Like managers are suits, So it took me a while to like kind of come to terms with all of that. And I think honestly, like, every manager is unique and has their unique strengths. And sometimes you find a really good fit, and sometimes it's not the best fit for the band. I think what's worked for me is that I am an artist first, so I can 100% relate to the struggles of being an artist. I know my way around the studio. I understand, the creative blocks and what it actually is like to tour and sleep on the floor instead of just kind of routing a tour. Or, I know what that drive is like overnight from, Portland to San Francisco when you've played 9 shows in a row. Like just little shit like that.
Right.
That has given me a leg up, I think, more so just in a trust factor with the artist than anything else. And that is really a big part of this whole world. Like if I can trust you, then I think we can get shit done. And artists aren't always the most trustful managers, for good reason, as we have 1,000 years of history to prove.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think having that level of experience in their shoes is invaluable. I mean, it's, and I love the fact that you mentioned that and mentioned the word trust, because it is such a unique relationship, and every relationship's different, but that's not a switch you can flip.
Yeah.
It's something you have to kind of earn. Coming to that realization and having somebody, in this case, Ryan, seeing that in you and encouraging you down that path is quite a bit different than, where you were previous, where it's just like, yeah, I'm going to produce. I'm
right.
gonna, make that shift.
Yeah.
It's like, it's interesting how life kind of has a tendency to open opportunities in ways that you can't always, necessarily envision or see until
Totally.
it's in front of you. And then, then it's your choice to kind of be open to it.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Really, really well put, and very much true in my life experience for sure. And same thing happened with the label early on with Doomtree. It was like I started when Doomtree had when we started in 2000 or 2001, I think there was like 15 members. I didn't even know half of them, it's like we whittled down to kind of the core 7 over the years, but we were always having these weekly meetings in Uptown, and we were really into this whole roles and responsibilities, and everyone has a job, and this is how we're going to, strengthen numbers. And so as the guy that I don't think I had yet to make an actual beat when POS asked me to join Doomtree, because he was just like, you'll figure it out, dude, you're in, come to this meeting. And so I was the archivist or the archivist. Basically, it was my job to, like, anytime we got even a teeny blurb written up in like City Pages or Pulse of the Twin Cities, any of the like weekly rags, I had to just go and grab like 20 copies so that, we could add it to our physical press kit that we mailed out, and so I went from that to also then learning how to make beats. But then, I think we had a literal cash box, which I still have at my office, with, that probably had like $40 in it, right? So it's like we were playing our first shows. The whole reason Doomtree, the crew, starts really is because none of the rappers had enough material to play a 30-minute set. So it was like POS and Cecil Otter, and they each had like 3 songs. They're like, well, if we do it together, we can pull off 30 minutes. Maybe we'll bring twice as many friends out. And so it really did just start as like, how do we fill up sets? How do we, when you have 15 people in a crew, it's not that hard to get 60 people to come out. Everyone's just in charge of whatever, the 4 people or whatever, right? So, so it starts like that organically. And, we're just spending money on making flyers at Kinko's or burning CDRs, going to Micro Center and getting the bulk CDRs. But the guy that was running the cash box eventually leaves. And so then there was no one to run the cash box. So I'm like, well, I can run the cash box. There's $40 in there. I could probably figure it out. And then I remember like going to Target, buying the actual like accounting ledger, with the ins and outs.
Right.
And I think I still have it somewhere. But it's amazing. It's like $25 from the Dinky Towner for open mic night, and then it's like negative $35 at Kinko's for the flyers for the next show, and it was like that every step of the way. So then it was like, how are we going to press CDs, or who are we going to reach out to and talk to about press? And then it got into shows, and eventually it was like, TuneCore comes around and we could get our music up digitally, and then who's going to track the accounting and who's going to do the royalty payments. And every step of the way, I just kind of raised my hand, and I'm glad I did. It kind of goes with that whole like, say yes, unless it's like, harmful to you. It's good to say yes.
Right.
It's like, don't say yes all the time, but say yes more than you say no, as long as it's not like horrible things you're saying yes to.
Right. No, that's great. Oh man. Yeah. And in the midst of all that, you learned how to create beats and continue to produce, and, have basically 2 trajectories, because I mean, when I knowing, and we haven't really touched on that, but I would love to hear kind of just how that, the production angle and partnerships with other artists kind of evolved, basically at the same time.
Yeah. So, I've got my crew and I'm making beats, and it's really exciting. Doomtree, we come up fairly quick in the Twin Cities. I think generally just because we were there were so many of us that it was like inescapable. Like you had to pay attention a little bit. And that's really exciting. The POS signs to Rhymesayers, and I get some beats on, my first like nationally distributed albums. And it was really exciting. Like Craig on the second POS album, I usually would do like a third of his records production wise. And I had Craig Finn from the Hold Steady and Lifter Puller, who was growing up, my idol, the person I looked up to. It kind of has become a mentor for me. He rapped, or he sang on one of Steph's POS's songs. And then Slug of Atmosphere guested on another one. And for me, coming up in junior high school, like Rhymesayers, they wrote the book
Yeah.
And so it's just this moment of like, oh my God, this is happening in the same way I remember it happening for my band. And then I just really was like, well, there's 5 rappers in Doomtree, plus we make crew albums. Like that's going to keep me really busy. And it wasn't until, I don't know, 2010. It was probably a good 10 years of mostly just making stuff within the Doomtree label and artists. And in 2010 or 11, I made a conscious decision that I wanted to, in addition to that, try and branch out and work with other artists too. And so I had made, in 2010, I'd made a solo album called Lava Bangers, which was just 20 instrumentals that kind of like flow together. It's think about like a workout mixtape or something.
Gotcha.
Right. It just unreleased beats that no one had ever really wanted to rap over. And so I just put it out. It's a little thing. And I got Lizzo had just moved into town from Denver and was starting to pop up like on a couple little songs here and there. She would show up at different parties or whatever. I think I'd met her in person once. And I just made this conscious decision in my mind, like be open this year to working with others. And she tweeted, this is the really good side of social media. Maybe we'll just focus on that. She tweeted into the ether, like, man, I wish I could afford a Lazerbeak beat. And she added me on Twitter, and I got that. And I remember it was like the weekend and I was chilling, just perfect timing. And I just decided to write back because I had kind of said no to a lot of people prior to that. It was just like, no, I just kind of do my thing here. And I just wrote back like, it doesn't cost that much actually. Like if you've got, I was really heavily into Mike's Hard Lemonade at the time. I was experimenting with Mike's Hard Lemonade. And so I was like, 6-pack of Mike's Hard Strawberry and we're in business. And then Ryan Olsen again chimes in like, I want in. And flash forward a week later, Lizzo takes the city bus to Ryan's bedroom studio and we lay down the first demos of what would become Lizzo Bangers. And so the story there is that she had come into town and she actually ended up hearing my instrumental mixtape Lava Bangers, and she had been in a creative rut, the way she tells it. And that tape kind of sparked some inspiration. She actually wrote to some of those instrumentals, and that's what led to her putting the tweet out. So when she came through with the 6-pack, she had already written to like 4 of those songs. And so we just recorded over those beats. And we're like, oh shit, let's make a record. And then we made a record, like no expectations, no money, truly no expectations, except for like, what if 1,000 people heard this in the Twin Cities? Like just really, this is like the story I go back to whenever I'm feeling conflicted or lacking motivation or inspiration. Like, that was it. No one even knew her. I wrote her bio. Like we were just trying to get people to pay attention, and we really loved the music we were making. And because of that, it ended up being, or not, I don't know if because of that, but I think that's part of the reason, because it was so pure in its scope. It was embraced, and then it ended up being, that's definitely the most successful album as far as just people in the world hearing it. And also, as far as actually making money off an album, like that was really the album that I had my first taste of like licensing money and sync opportunities, and realized like, oh, there might be a way to create a living from making music, or a half of a living from creating music.
Right.
And so anyways, just all that to go back to the like saying yes or keeping yourself open to possibilities. Like when I teach classes or go to high schools and colleges, I talk about that because it's so easy to only think about the bottom line or only think about the fame or, the successes. But without that kind of like deeply embedded passion for just the music, I really don't think you get all that stuff. Like you got to have it all. And so that's always my reminder, like make it about the music and the rest will probably come. And if it doesn't, you'll figure it out and deliver pizzas, and like you can do both.
Right.
And which is what I do. Like if I had my druthers, I would just be an artist. If money wasn't an issue, like I would make beats all day, every day, and that would be all I would do. That's like, I think what I'm meant to do, or, the philosophical, like, what are you born to do? Like, I think that's my true calling. But I'm in a way, I'm glad I was never able to make it fully like that, because it made me open myself up to these other things. That so my line has always been little money, lots of places, has been like my motto for 20 years. I'm going to put it on t-shirts. I'll write a book someday about that. But but little money, lots of places. Like, and you just, I used to have this, I still kind of do. Like, if I can make $200 in a day legally, you know, in some way involving music, whether that was like, you know, an ad agency hits you up and wants you to try to make some dumb thing for a commercial, and there's a demo fee for whatever you make, $200, or it's a speaking fee to go to college, or it's whatever. I was always like, just do it. You know, it's like those little things. It's easy to just hope for the big fish, but you string enough of those little things together. One, you pay your bills every month, and two, you just open yourself up to like this kind of tipping point. And after doing that for so many years now, it's not that I don't worry about money, because I do, just like everybody else, but kind of naturally more opportunities come up because I've built those relationships, and I've proven that I can do all these different types of things. And so it's just opened me up to a lot of different types of ways to earn income. It's not just, you know, getting 1 million streams on Spotify or just playing a show. It's like, it's a lot of different things. And that I'm grateful for, because otherwise I definitely would have had to go get like a real deal job at some point.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too. I mean, what I hear out of that as well, that resonates with me is just, you know, the openness on all sides, and then the creative component of it too, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be bold and brave, like Lizzo was, to reach out and think that it grabs your attention. And then you, in turn, along with Ryan, were open to the idea of just chasing that down over mutual interest and appreciation. But then I also stop and think, you know, like, the other people that you've worked with on the business side of things, like if you were just doing beats and that's all you were doing, you know, you don't get that opportunity to take this wealth of experience and this vantage point being an artist, but also being willing to kind of share that with other people's careers.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's Lisa or with Sean and Heartbones and other people you work with. I mean, that's a really amazing thing to be able to share from an experience level, regardless of the business.
Totally. And, you know, collaboration is like, is at the root of all of this, whether it's the creative side, the business side, which also I think of as very much a creative thing, the business side that we're more in, you know, maybe a little less sexy, but still, like, you know, you can find there's some pretty amazing creativity that goes into it. Yeah, collaboration, man. I mean, growing up in the Twin Cities, it was almost, I've always prefaced this with like, I've been extremely fortunate to travel the world and perform music at some point in my life. And so I've gotten to see a lot of different cities, and I've gotten to see their music scenes and communities and how their ecosystems interact. And there's some really great ones out there, but I just always come home and I'm like, there's no other place like this. And I think it's because we're almost forced. It's like in our DNA to collaborate, because we are this like small, big city that doesn't really have access to outside major industry in the music world or in the arts. Really, there's not a big record label here with A&Rs. There's barely booking agents and managers here. Right. And so out of necessity, we have to talk to one another to figure out the answers. Like, and so it's just like rooted in the community here that you know, pre-COVID, and I know post-COVID, it's not uncommon for on a Wednesday night there to be like 6 sold out shows with an all local bill with bands of all different genres. You know, you could have a bluegrass band opening up for a punk band with a rapper in the middle and a fucking violinist somewhere. Like, it's just, we're so used to that because it's just how it's been. It really isn't like that many other places. And so that type of collaboration that I learned early on as a musician, I've really held on to and taken with me in the business world, whether that's like in pursuing kind of weird co-branding opportunities outside of the box, thinking of that type of stuff, you know, like even, I mean, I know a lot of people bands have made beers now, but like making a beer with Surly or just the dumb stuff. And I'm not taking sole credit for any of this stuff. Like Dessa's done a bunch of cool things. Dessa has like an ice cream and a whiskey and blah, blah, like just thinking outside the box and being willing to collaborate on on less of an art level and more of a like strategic business level has really helped me feel good about business, like feel like it's not this evil monster necessarily. Like it's actually real people. And when real people with like-minded positive visions come together, like you make some really cool shit, and it helps to have some cool music to tie into it,
Right. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to touch on, just kind of segues into, in a sense, because I'm thinking about the two sides of that community, the artist community and the way it can thrive here, but also the audience component of it and the fan base community component of it. When I moved to Minneapolis 7-8 years ago from Nashville, I mean, Nashville's an industry town, and you sit in the back with your arms crossed and chat through a show. And here it's definitely more of a fan focused town. And it's always true. Like when I had artists coming through Twin Cities, it was always great shows. But I think that feeds in a nice kind of way as well. And, thinking about the cross genre component and whatnot, I'd love for you to chat a little bit about how you and Dessa ended up collaborating with the Minnesota Orchestra and in the manner you guys did. Because I think, if you live here in town, you're like, oh, that's obvious. But then if you were to kind of like zoom out a little bit, it's like, that's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do,
Totally.
To do. My wife and I went to the 2 nights that you guys recorded. It was on our anniversary, actually.
Amazing.
March, a few years ago. Yes. So we were like, we're going to go and spend our anniversary.
I love it.
And take in that show. And it was just so endearing on so many levels. And I think that is kind of like, to me, in some respects, kind of a cultivation of just all of those elements.
Yes.
That is unique to this market and to the creative community and the fan community to allow something like that to happen.
Yes. Oh my God. I'll try not to talk your ear off for like an hour about this, but so just to touch on your first point, which I think is dead on, and something I had to get a little older to understand, is that yes, the whole reason that an artist can make a living here playing like 2 shows a month, the whole reason why we have artists that work full-time as artists here is because we have a community of fans and listeners, which a lot of places don't have, right? They have a great scene of artists without a huge scene to support those artists. And here, and I give not all the credit, but a shit ton of credit to First Avenue for cultivating and giving local bands stages, not just at the entry, but being ready to take the risk of those. I played my first time headlining First Avenue was with the Plastic Constellations, and it was a co-bill with us and Tapes, right when they had just blown up. And it was an all local, the Stunning and Kill the Vultures opened up, and tickets were $5. And it was a real risk for First Avenue to take that on, an all local show in the main room. Like, how much money it costs just to turn the lights on in the main room, right? And it sold out. And it was, this is whatever, 15 years ago. But that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, without an institution like First Avenue giving the opportunity to kind of build bands up locally and to wider audiences. And then also the Current, when they came in, really, obviously we had local radio like Radio K and things like that, but they reached such a wider audience that the two of those things in conjunction was such a huge lift in momentum to the local scene. And it equates to dollars. Like it really is an economy, our own little economy. And so without those people buying those tickets, I don't think you see such a thriving community. So yes, anyways, I just wanted to completely validate that. Like, I really think we are unique in the fact that it's not just the people making the art of any medium. It's the fact that we have really open-minded, interested people in this entire state that don't just want to hear, John Cougar Mellencamp on classic rock radio or whatever. No shots at the Cougs. No shots at the Cougs. I have tremendous respect for them. And so yeah, so then the segue to Minnesota Orchestra, this kind of piggybacks on what I was talking about before, like the creativity in business and in co-branding. It was like Dessa had cultivated this amazing relationship with the orchestra through, they do a Pops concert every year where they kind of bring in a local artist to do a few songs. I think she had performed with them a handful of songs. And then I don't know how, at some point I got brought in because of the label side of things. But it was just like, and I'm not an orchestra, like, dude, it's like chemistry watching those people do what they do up there. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. It's fascinating. It is like pure magic. And, meeting with the higher ups there and the conductors. And when this idea sparked, like, what if, Dessa had played a couple shows over a handful of years with them, and they were really successful. They had sold out. And they were great moments. And then it was like, what if we could record this? Like, what if we could make this into an actual living artifact that instead of just having this like warm, fuzzy feeling for 2 weeks after the show, that we could really be like, this is a moment in time. And through a lot of discussion and crunching numbers and blah, 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 we figured out that with 2 shows, ticketed shows, we could basically raise the money to make a record. And we're talking like a record of that scale. I think there were over 75 individual microphone outputs in order to, from the overheads to the room mics to the individuals to obviously the 5 or 6 singers and guest musicians. Like the scope was insane. And, we basically had 2 shows to pull it off, and you kind of get what you get. So I just remember, we finally, it's so fun, when you have the idea and then it's, it's going to happen and the tickets go on sale and shows sell out. And you're like, you have that initial like, oh, we did it. And then 2 weeks before the show, you're like, oh shit, we actually still have to do it. Like now we have to actually pull it off. And it's really real. And, you only really get like those like state orchestras are so incredible. They don't even see the music until basically like a day or 2 before. Like they had 1 dress rehearsal with Dessa, and they're just so good that they just put the sheet music up there and they nail it. And the conductor, Sarah, had done her homework, and she knew exactly what the fuck. And like in real time, you're just like, oh, watching like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And these people are just absolute pros. And to be there, Andy Thompson, who's our musical collaborator with Dessa, it's like me and him and Dessa have been doing a lot of music together. He is also a composer, and so he took all these Dessa songs, and over the last few years created he created the sheet music for however many instruments there are in the orchestra, like 80 people or whatever. And so just seeing so many kind of pros, I guess there's got to be a better word, but just like so many people that are so good at the individual thing that they do come together, and all of those puzzle pieces fitting in and creating this thing, and knowing that like there was 1,000 ways that it might not have happened, right? Like all these little things that could have gone wrong, and to pull it off is like, I almost retired. Because I was just like, this is it, man. Like, this is crazy. When you're like bear hugging the timpani player afterwards or whatever, you're just like, what is this? And me and Andy are in the stairwell of the Minnesota Orchestra for both of those performances with the entire audio capture team. And we're just on headphones. We didn't even see the performance. We're just on headphones listening for any, little mess ups or if there's any squeaks or whatever. So we're just like jotting down notes. Andy's got the full score in front of him, and I'm just like taking notes down in my phone. And so then we called it the war room at the orchestra. The next day we had a day off in between shows, and so it's like, Grant, who's like runs that place, and Sarah, the conductor, and a few other people, and then us, Dessa, her manager Becky, and we're just going down, listening to the first show, writing down all the notes of what we need to make sure we hit the second show. And then, it's like pressure's on. It's like, remember Bozo? Did you ever watch Bozo the Clown on WGN at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know at the end where they're throwing the balls into those 3 cups or whatever, and it's like if you get a ball in the first cup, then you get to throw a ball in the second cup or whatever. It was like that. It was like the pressure is on. Like you better get the ball in the cup. You want to win the Bozo prize. And so, you know, they crushed it the second night. They totally rebounded after any little thing that would have gone wrong. Most of the stuff were like, all right, they nailed it the second time. So now we know we've got a good take and we can cull from both these performances for the record. Right. So it's just like, then there's this strict, because it's so unionized, you get basically, I think 40 minutes afterwards for anything that you're recording. You have the musicians there for 40 minutes to get anything else that you need to maybe punch, or like, oh, we need to take this 4 bars again so we have it, because it was it was a little bit fast on the second night or whatever. And there's literally someone with the union that has a clock, and they're just there and they stop it. You get like a 5 minutes worth of break time in that 40 minutes. So, you know, like if there's ever any hesitation with the start of a thing. So we literally have a half hour as the audience is clearing out the second night. Me and Andy and Becky and Dessa and Sarah, the conductor, are just like reviewing all our notes. The orchestra goes get some water. They come back and the fucking lady hits start. And it's like 39-49, whatever. And it's like, okay, Andy's got a megaphone or whatever. And he's just like, all right, we're going to go, you know, whatever bar 78, the coda of this song. And we're going to take it. And, you know, then the audio team, and we're like, did they get it? Did we get it? And it was just, it literally went down to like the countdown, like 20 seconds, you know, it's like 20, 19. And like, I think at 15 seconds, we got our last thing. And I've never felt that type of like, you know, that was like winning the NBA championships or something. You're like, oh my God, we got it in under the wire. Wow. Anyways, it was amazing to just have any part. And like, as a musician, I basically have nothing to do with that. Like Andy created the score for all of that stuff. The musicians are insane. The conductor is insane. The orchestra is so humble and like open arms to the whole thing. Like they geeked out about it more than we did sometimes, you know, like they were as geeked as we were as like a rap label to make an album with an orchestra. They were geeked to make an album with a rap label. Like it was this kind of mutual admiration, and it still goes on. Like, you know, this morning I'm still on a text thread currently with all those people, and we just dropped a new Dessa song, and so they're all like, you know, you're getting the emojis are flying and the gifts and blah blah blah. Like I think I'll always be in contact with those people because it was just such a memorable thing, and I hope we get to do it again, whether it's with Dessa or with, you know, I'm excited by the fact that they're now more willing to take a risk with other pop artists or artists that aren't orchestral based, you know. So I know that they were working with oh my God, who was it? COVID shut it down. Well, you're gonna edit this out.
Yeah, that's okay. I think I know what you're thinking of, but I can't think of it. Yeah,
it escapes me, but they're great. Cloud Cult. They were going to be doing a live thing with Cloud Cult, I think, to record for a record, and so I hope that becomes a thing that we can like hang our hat on, the fact that Minnesota is that like willing to take a risk where we can do things like that, and not really, people don't even really bat an eye. Like you said, like here it just kind of felt like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. And, you know, literally anywhere else in the world, it would probably be a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a great story.
It's pretty good.
Cool. Well, you know, at the risk of not keeping you too much longer, I would like to run through some of these lightning round questions.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
As long as you're game.
I'm absolutely game.
Cool. So, what's the first record you ever bought?
Oh my God, probably Amy Grant, Heart in Motion was a cassette.
Oh yeah?
I'm still a huge fan of that album. I play Baby Baby at least once every couple months, to my kids' chagrin. Awesome. So yeah, because I grew up in more Christian. Yeah, Baby Baby, Heart in Motion by Amy Grant. Final
right,
answer.
yeah, because it's her big breakthrough on the pop front for sure.
Oh yeah. That was a big moment where she's kind of separated from the church or whatever. They were like, wait, it's like when Taylor Swift went pop almost in a weird way.
Right. Yeah, that's great. What was the first concert you attended?
Black Crows at Roy Wilkins Auditorium. I was in.
Oh yeah, wow.
I was in. It was
what tour?
It was the Amorica tour, and so this is in my. This is 7th grade in my kind of confused, like coming out of my R&B phase, moving into my indie rock phase, but like getting kind of stuck in the middle with like Counting Crows and Black Crows and I don't know,
a lot of crows.
But I convinced my dad to take me and 2 friends, and I'll never forget, like I had only heard like a couple songs of Black Crows. I don't even know what I was thinking, but I was like, this kind of rocks. And we get there and it's just, I didn't know their whole vibe. I didn't know it was just like pot everywhere and, you know, like psychedelics and all this stuff. And we get there and it just reeks of weed. And I'm in 7th grade and my dad, who's born again Christian since 21, like he's like, man, smells like college in here. And we just watched the whole thing. I bought a t-shirt and wore it to school the next day. I had no idea what it was, but it was like their drawing of their crow with like a handful of magic mushrooms, like an upside down star, of joint in his mouth, like. And I was immediately, Mr. Lescarbo, my social studies teacher, just like marched me down to the principal's office, and I had to turn the shirt inside out. So, anyways, long story. Black Crows, first concert.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you read Steve Gorman's book?
No.
About his. Oh, you should totally read it.
I'm writing it down right now. I'm writing it down.
Actually, the audiobook's even better.
Really?
But yeah, Stephen Hayden co-wrote it with him, but
amazing.
You know, he the drummer for the Black Crows for years, and he talks quite a bit about how they didn't really fit in. You know, they weren't a grunge band, you know, and they definitely weren't a hair band,
totally.
You know, coming out of that. So to break through the way they did in the early 90s was, you know, they were kind of on their own.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You know, I'll probably end up listening to Amorica tonight to just remember what. And if you remember that album cover, I had the Target, you know, we shopped at Target or whatever. So I had it just looked like a triangle with an American flag. I had no idea. Like I remember seeing later, or maybe on the inside, there's like a naked lady or something like that. I was just like, oh my God. Like that was like my entire experience with the Black Crows, just always a little late to the punch.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Oh man. Well, since it is COVID times, what was the last concert you went to?
It's fitting. The last real concert I went to probably was Dessa at First Avenue, where she did a stripped down version of the orchestra hall stuff. So it was like more of a string quartet. But I remember seeing that, you know, that was our dream. Like, could we recreate this in a sweaty rock club? And the answer is like, not all the way, but you know, we can do it a little bit. And so it was cool, like to see those really quiet moments in First Ave, like the loudest room I've ever been in, and to watch, you know, 1,600 people be completely silent was pretty powerful. And then I guess if it was really the last concert, it was my band Shredders got to play the Timberwolves halftime show for the last Timberwolves home game before the NBA shut down. And so the real last concert I went to was my own, and I got to meet Crunch, the mascot, which is a dream come true. Again, almost retired myself because it was so great. He played cowbell next to me for our last song. It's great. Pretty good.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I became a fan of that project through Roman Mars.
Oh, sweet.
Okay, what's the political podcast he has? What Trump can teach us about con law.
Con law, yep, exactly right. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah, Roman Mars is the best.
Yeah, most definitely. What's a recent music discovery of yours that comes to mind?
Oh man, that's a good one. You know, I've really. There's so many ways I could go with this one, but if I'm just being honest, like. I have doubled down so hard in the last couple of years back into my early R&B fandom. Like, I knew for the last probably 10 years that was really where my heart is. If I had to pick one thing to listen to, it'd be some chill R&B music. But lately, it's just been so cool to watch this kind of modern R&B, alternative R&B, whatever people want to call it. It's almost like bedroom lo-fi R&B happen, and there's so much cool shit coming out of Toronto specifically. And so I've just been like eating that stuff up. So, there's this group called Division, DVSN, Party Next Door. I mean, Drake, a lot of it stems from kind of Drake's weird Canadian take on 90s R&B that the whole world loves. But so, that's really all. If it's my turn to pick the music and it's just for me, that's where I'm going. So it's not a great answer, but it's a truthful one at least.
No, that's a totally great answer. And then lastly, what do you enjoy the most outside of music? Because obviously music's such a bedrock to so many.
Yeah.
But the things that we do, I always am fascinated to see where
totally. Man, a stock answer, but I love watching movies. It's like I think that is my favorite thing to do. Like, especially when music kind of becomes your job or whatever. Like I've never been the type that was inspired to create music because I heard other music necessarily. It was never like, oh, I heard this and now I've got to try to do that or do it better or one up this person. I've always been the most just kind of like creatively inspired by film, I think, or by really great shows. And same for books, but film is like just such a 2 or 3 hours and you're in this whole other world and there's so many factors. There's like, the way it looks, the way it sounds, the acting or the non-acting or the cinematography that just like, it blows my mind. That is also like magic. And I've really gotten into, much to my wife's dismay, I've gone like full on art house, like slow cinema, like black and white, Eastern European subtitled, like I got the Criterion channel. And so now I have Wednesday nights are like, we've doing this thing, started in COVID. Thankfully, our marriage counselor told us about this. She was like, give yourselves a night off each. So Tuesday nights is my wife. She gets the night off from the kids and she just gets to go into this other room and do whatever she wants. Wednesday night is my night. And now that's where I watch my 7-hour 1950s black and white epics. But I always feel the next morning, I just feel like alive. Like I just, your mind gets like a workout and I love it so much. And and it stays with me. Whereas like an album I'm with it in the moment and then I maybe want to listen to it again. But movies, like I think about when they're really good, I think about them for weeks on end. And they just kind of dominate my being in a way that is so cool to me. Like, so yeah, watching movies, it's great.
No, I love that. And one thing that kind of I found in myself that was kind of surprising during this time, a friend of ours rented out for their son's birthday party, the Riverview Theater. Awesome. Theater here in Minneapolis. And we went and watched a movie back in I think it was September, before things picked up again and it felt relatively safe. Yep. There's like maybe 10 or 15 of us spread out in a 300-400 seat theater. But it was I almost got emotional just like being in that room and seeing something like that on the big screen. It's like, and it made me dawn, I miss live music really, really bad. Yeah. And I totally appreciate, the vantage point of a camera and a crowd. Yeah. Because I miss being around and seeing a crowd in a way too. In a way that normally before all this, I'd be like, just get on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where's the close up? Yeah. But, I think I miss seeing movies more than I do music. I miss the idea of just going, you know what? I've got 2 hours to kill. I'm going to go see a movie. Yeah.
Or like,
really up until now, you could almost do that any hour of the day and there would be something playing, And it's like, music's not like that. You have to schedule, if you're going to see live performance, it's an event that you anticipate and you have to plan for. And I just miss the spontaneity of going to see.
Yes. Well, and it's such a, I think seeing music live is such a social experience generally, even if you're by yourself, you're like, it's loud and you have other people sweat on you and you got to at least talk to the bartender or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you're going to run into somebody. And movies, it's such a weird, like, it's almost like a group meditation. Like we all turn our phones off and we just sit there and take it in. And like the only time there's any interaction is generally if we all laugh at the same time or whatever, like, or shriek. And then we just spill out of this dark room and maybe talk about it or maybe just ponder. It's such a different thing. You're totally right. I cannot wait to go just see a movie. And speaking of that, that emotional thing that you said with being at the Riverview. So Dessa was tracking we're doing this new song a month thing rollout. And so she actually went in to the studio on Monday to just do the final tweaks to this song that we're gonna be putting out in February. And she texted me because she was like, I definitely weirded Joe, our engineer. She's like, I really weirded Joe out. And I don't know, this session's going really bad. And I was like, what happened? She's like, well, he pressed play and I realized I hadn't heard music in this setting this loud in 10 months. She's just been like in her apartment with like laptop speakers or whatever. And here she is in a beautiful studio with like super high quality speakers, really loud. And she's like, I just started crying. I don't know what, like I had a emotional reaction. And all of a sudden, Joe's turning around to be like, what do you think? And she's just bawling. I was like, oh, pull it together, man, because we got to get this mix done. So you got to figure it out. Yeah. But you're right. I think we're gonna be faced. I mean, this is going to be like a physical and emotional thing to be out in the world again, doing all these things.
Yeah.
And it's going to be heavy and it's going to be really cool, but it's going to be powerful. And I think there'll be a lot of feels. And I think we'll all probably have our crying in public moments regardless. So bring it on, man.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, I look forward to that. Oh man. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, dude. It's a pleasure. It's been great to get to know you over the years, and it's nice to just chop it up with a friend. We need this type of conversation, man. So it's been great to get to know you through all the management hangs too. Yeah.
No, thanks for joining in on this. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun.
Of course. Well, best of luck with everything you got going on. I know I'll be seeing you plenty on Zoom until we can be in a Sweaty Rock Club again together.
Exactly.
And yeah, let me know if I could ever be of any help with anything, man. You know how to get a hold of me.
Definitely, man. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Many thanks to Lazerbeak for taking the time to chat with us today and for sharing his various experiences with us. As always, if you're so inclined, please rate us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tough Love Pod. That's TOUGHLOVPOD. And above all, share this podcast with your friends and fellow music industry and artist communities. It takes a village. You can reach us at chris@anhedoniamanagement.com. That's CHRIS at ANHEDONIAMGMT.com. Be well, trip up, get back up, and let's learn as we go. Until next time.